want you to know that I support Paul. I think that he is going to be an excellent candidate for Victoria. I know that we had an excellent candidate. This used to be a good Liberal riding under David Anderson, who was Senior Minister for British Columbia for the longest time, and was an excellent minister. I think it's time we took this riding back. It's important that we take this riding back because I think that this is one of the most important ridings in British Columbia and in Canada. It's where the legislature is. It is where there are many people here who need to look at the issues and who've always talked about the issues of oceans and about a solid environment with regard to our oceans. But more than that, this was taken over by an NDP, and I want to tell you something. Having sat in the House of Commons and known what happened to this riding when David Anderson was here, I want many of you to remember that it was David Anderson who brought in the ocean strategy that sunsetted and that was never brought back by this particular Conservative government. The Conservative government in Canada has harmed this country greatly. They have spent the last 6 years completely dismantling all of the infrastructure that was built in this country. A lot of infrastructure that was built by Liberals, but I even have to say that even Brian Mulroney did not move us so far away from who we are as a people and what our dreams and visions are as a nation and our place in the world as Stephen Harper has done. This is not a progressive Conservative government that we have in Ottawa. Most of you know that. It is not a progressive government at all. It's an ideological government that is harming this country, harming our reputation. If you think that Medicare is safe, let me tell you, under Stephen Harper, it isn't. Right now, he is dismantling Medicare, and the reason and the way he's dismantling it is by walking away from the Canada Health Act and from the Council of the Federation, and every single question he's asked in the House, every single question he's asked by the media about Medicare, he said, don't look at me, it's a provincial jurisdiction. We are a federation. It was a Liberal Prime Minister who brought in Medicare, Lester Pearson. It was under a Liberal Prime Minister that Monique Bégin, Liberal Prime Minister Pierre-Éliott Trudeau, that Monique Bégin brought in the Canada Health Act that cemented this as with a great number of tools at our disposal to ensure that it really doesn't matter where you live in this country, whether you live in an isolated part of the country, whether you live in a rural part of the country, whatever province you live in. It doesn't matter what your pre-existing condition is, whether you were born with multiple illnesses or not, whether it would mean that you will forever need the system. It didn't matter, and it didn't matter how wealthy or poor you were. The Canada Health Act very clearly said that Medicare is here for every Canadian. By walking away, as he did last year in Victoria, when the Council of the Federation met, and by suggesting that he unilaterally made a decision that will cut the transfer of payments that now has a 6% escalator clause to a 3% escalator clause, and then saying to the premiers when they said, let's discuss it, he said, no, that's it, take it or leave it, basically. And the premiers begged to meet with him, and the premiers begged to meet with him again at the Council of the Federation meeting in Halifax, knowing full well that if left to 10 provinces and 3 territories, what we will have is a balkanized system in which no Canadian will any longer be able to say that it doesn't matter where they live. There will be small provinces that won't be able to make it. And therefore we will see Medicare frittering away and balkanizing in 2017 when this happens. And that is something that we need to fight for. That is something that I know that you will fight for, Paul. But I also want you to say, I mean, Paul made a very important point. What we have with Thomas Mulcair and Stephen Harper are two sides of the same coin. On one side, you have Stephen Harper, who is ideologically based, who divides us as a nation into them and us. Those who don't have jobs are obviously lazy and obviously stupid, and if they need EI, well, it's obviously a drain on all of us who work. That kind of them and us that he has instilled in this nation is creating a real rift intergenerationally between rural and urban Canada and between Canadians. And then we have the NDP on the other side, who has decided to also create a rift and divide the West from the East, as Paul said. But more importantly, what you need to understand about the NDP is that they talk the same talk we talk. They talk about Medicare. They say it's Tommy Douglas who brought it in, but I can't remember Tommy Douglas ever being a prime minister of this country, so it's kind of interesting. But he had a good idea, and of course, you know, after the Royal Commission on Health, we got an idea, and the Liberal government brought it in. But that's not what I'm talking about. The NDP also they brought in private members' bills on a national housing strategy, which was again brought in by Paul Martin Sr. under a Liberal government. They talked about Aboriginal peoples and the need for self-government, which Jean Chrétien spoke about when he was Minister for Aboriginal People many, many moons ago and wrote a white paper on it. They talk about wanting to look at the early learning and early childhood education and childcare. They put out private members' bills on those three major things. And yet I want to tell you that when Paul Martin was Prime Minister, he brought those three bills in. A national housing strategy at about $2 billion accepted by Cabinet in 2005. He also brought in an early learning and early childhood education and childcare, and brought in and negotiated with the provinces with a ticket of $5 billion across Canada. He brought in Kelowna Accord, which was going to give to the Aboriginal people self-determination over their housing, their education, and their health. This was all in 2005. And because Paul remembered that at a time when there was a minority government under Pearson and these things came in, that the NDP helped to make them happen by supporting them, he gave Privy Council status to Jack Layton and brought him in and showed him what the budget in 2006, if we were still government, would look like. And those three things were in that budget: a national housing strategy, a national early learning and childcare, and a Kelowna Accord. And Jack Layton looked at them and he said, what Paul said to him, I know we're going down. We're not asking you to save us. We're going to be going down, and we know that we're going to lose government. But we would hope that you would wait before you do that until we bring in a budget in February. And if you could do that, then when we have a new government, they will not be able to cancel it. It'll be there, and it would be a legacy that would carry on. We would have been into the 6th year of all three of those programs. And Jack Layton said, no, right now I can win more seats, and therefore I won't do it. And so anytime you hear the NDP talking about how much they care about those things, remember that they had an opportunity to bring it in and to make sure that it was cemented in the budget, and they did not. They refused to do so. So there's a hypocrisy there that you must remember, because right now this is an NDP riding, and that's who you're going to be fighting mostly in this riding. And we want that riding back. We want that riding where guys like David Anderson, who sat in Cabinet at the time, supported all of these issues, was passionate about these issues. And so that brings me to what I'm standing here to do. I want to introduce to you someone I don't have to introduce to you. You know him. He has been your Member of Parliament. He's been the Senior Minister for British Columbia. He has been passionate about the environment. He's been passionate about oceans. He's been passionate about fisheries. He came out, pardon the term, out of the closet to speak recently as an ex-fisheries minister on what this government was doing in their omnibus budget bill to fisheries. He spoke out with a progressive conservative ex-minister, John Fraser, spoke out and warned of the dangers of unraveling everything that was built in this country. And so it is my pleasure to introduce to you one more time a friend, a colleague, and a hero of mine, David Anderson.